Welcome back to another episode of the Painted Arrow podcast.
Ooh.
That's awkward. It's Black Friday sale.
Yeah, it's the Black Friday sale. Talking to you.
Anyway, welcome back to another episode of the Painted Arrow podcast. We have Devin Cole
Yep.
here to tell a story of a buck.
A bucktail, you might call it.
Aren't those the best kind?
Yeah, they are. That's what we live for, I think.
For a couple months of the year, it is.
Being able to tell a bucktail.
This is a good story. This is the story of trial.
Redemption. Yeah.
Yeah. They all are, I feel like, at some point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was, I was talking to our buddy Justin Hollinsworth, and I was telling him, this has been a big learning season for me, and I had a lot of issues, and, things happened, and messed up on some good deer, and just really big learning year. And he goes, they all are. If you're looking at them the right way, they're all learning years.
Mm.
And I thought that was pretty profound. So, yeah, that's what this year was. I had some screw-ups, had some missed opportunities, and ended up punching a tag on a good deer, one that I was excited to punch a tag on, kind of late, right before gun season. I was running out of time, and got it done on November 12th. So, right? It's November 12th?
I don't know.
It was. It was the morning of November 12th, I think.
So, leading up to that, tell me about you had like a malfunction.
Well, before that one even, I had my first good opportunity of the year. I had a deer that had been shoulder shot that bedded on my property that I made a stalk on.
Completely lay that out, because nobody's heard this one yet. Nobody's heard any of this. So just tell us about it.
So earlier in the season, gosh, it probably, I could look back at my phone and tell you exactly when it was because I had it on video. Plug in the Mag Pro there. Let me take a look here. But basically, I had an opportunity at a deer that I had seen during a morning hunt. It was a big deer, pretty good deer. Good for around here. Definitely a 3-year-old or better. Good mass, just a big 8-point. And he had bedded late morning on my property. And he was limping somewhat. And I had kind of observed him a little bit, and I could tell he was injured, but he was shoulder shot. So he was still getting around pretty good. Like it was very clear that whatever injury he had sustained was not
life-altering.
It was not like a fatal injury, but he was not real ruddy. Like I tried calling to him before I could tell he was injured, and he was not real interested in coming to figure out what the grunts were about, or he didn't care much about the rattling or really any of that. So, I got down and made a play on this deer. Oh, here's a video right here. So it was November 2nd. I got down, and before I got down, I saw this deer bed, and I kept ranging some landmarks that were close to him. And I was out in kind of the middle of a swampy, canary grass type field. There was some buckbrush and some other things, but he had come kind of out of the buckbrush, was mostly in the open, kind of near one tree. And there was a big clump of grass between him and I. And when I was in the saddle where he bedded, was maybe 115 some yards away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was ranging him, and then I ranged this other clump of grass that I could cut most of the distance while being behind. And I'm like, if I can get to that, I'll be inside of 30 yards from him. But this particular morning, I basically cut it a little too close. Had I gotten out of the stand earlier and gave myself more time, I would have killed that deer. But my wife had to leave to go do something, and I had to come inside to watch the boys. And so I hopped out of the stand and made my way up to the front of the property and kind of did this stalk in the meantime. And I kind of rushed it. But essentially, I cut all the distance. I got inside of 30, and I grunted a couple times and made a couple noises with my mouth to try to see if I could get him to slowly stand up. And he wouldn't. And at this point, I could see his rack in the grass. He's inside of 30 yards from me. And so then I slowly just started taking one step at a time, a little closer and closer, and then I could see his rack move, and he was like getting a little more alert. And yeah, I tried grunting a couple times, see if I could get him to stand up, and he didn't. And then finally, like as I'm approaching, and I'm probably closer to 25 yards at this point, he stood up and he bounded 3 times, and then stopped and turned to see what it was. And at that point, I drew as soon as he stood up, and he bounded a couple times, and I just had to guess, where he had bounded out to, and ended up shooting right underneath him. So.
And you were saying, like, you think that if you'd had a little more time, like, didn't have to run in to see your, to watch the boys, you probably would have taken your time a little more?
Oh, yeah, because it was a pretty early morning bed that he made, and if I had the time to sit there and just wait him out, I have no doubt that later morning he would have standed up and either resituated or maybe moved a little bit.
And you would have just...
Maybe there would have been a wind switch. Like, had I just waited for him to stand up naturally, I could have killed him pretty easily. Like, I was in a great spot, wind in my face. Like, it was exactly what you want.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a huge... At that point, I was not beat up about that opportunity at all. If anything, I was riding high because I'd never had a situation like that, never spotted a bedded deer that I could make a play on. And that was like a huge, feather in my cap, big experience builder. Like, I was just super pumped to have had the opportunity to try to cut the distance on a deer and get in tight to kill him. And I did. I just didn't kill him. So at that point during the season, I wasn't that beat up at all. I was just like, that was a great opportunity at a great deer, and what a cool encounter.
Yeah.
And I'm still not beat up about it, but it just looking back, it ends up being one of the encounters that, you kind of wish you would have capitalized on.
Right.
So, yeah, that was November 2nd, and then through the Moment series and the, kind of the good days of the rut, I was seeing some good deer, getting eyes on good bucks, just nothing close enough or responding to calls to the point where I could get it close enough to kill it. And that really persisted until, so from November 2nd through the morning of November 9th was the first time I had a really nice buck close enough and responding to calls, and basically had an opportunity in a stand. Excuse me. And you killed on November 9th a couple years ago, and I know you liked that day. And in particular, this morning, I was a little late getting around in the morning, and I was waiting on a wind switch later in the day, so I was going to set a spot for just a handful of hours, and then I was going to get out of there and go back into a different spot later in the afternoon. And I make my way out to this spot, and of course, I forget my rangefinder, my binoculars, which it maybe is the first time that this has ever happened to me in maybe the recent 3 or 4 years of hunting, to the point where I never realized how much I rely on my binoculars. Like, I'm always hunting with my binoculars. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then you don't have them. You're sitting there, and you're like...
I felt naked, and I'm like, there's certain people that just don't hunt with binoculars, and then they don't see anything that, no wonder you say you got skunked, because you don't see anything other than the deer that walked directly in front of you. Mm-hmm. So that was an interesting morning, but I forgot my bino harness, which had my binoculars and rangefinder in it. And luckily I was sitting a familiar spot. So I had, I knew what tree was 25 and what tree was 30. And, within reason, I could pretty well guess where the shots were going to be and what the range was going to be. And the morning started off really slow. Didn't see any deer for the first hour, and then, sure enough, I'm sitting on the edge of a pine stand, looking over like kind of an oak flat, funnel between me and a swamp. And sure enough, right about 8:15 in the morning, here comes a big white rack running right down through the middle of it, trotting. I don't know if a doe had worked through, but he was kind of acting like he was chasing a doe and cruising. And I see him, and obviously I don't have my binoculars, can't tell what he is from where he's at, but I just throw out a grunt, one contract grunt, Brat. And he turns his head and starts coming right now. Like, there was no decision. It was just like he heard it, and I'm coming over there right now. So I start scrambling, throw my phone on the Mag Pro. He comes in. There was an opportunity where I probably should have given him one more grunt that would have somewhat deviated how he would have come in, but I didn't. I let the suspense build, and he was still working off of where that original call had come from and where I pointed it. And he came in, and basically I knew he was between 25 and 30 yards, and ended up being like 27. I drew back, stopped him, and I was wearing the First Light Solitude coat, and my big collar with the zipper was sticking way out. And at the time, I didn't know exactly what happened. But basically, I draw, and I execute my shot very calmly, and I watch the arrow go 6 foot behind the deer and whack a log. Big loud sound. Deer doesn't know what the heck happened, and I'm immediately just thinking, what in the world just happened? Like, honestly, when I called you, I thought somehow my arrow fell off the rest, and
Yeah.
the arrow just, flung sideways or something. But then right after that, I knocked another arrow and drew just to kind of see what happened, and it was very obvious. Like, the jacket was just resting right on the string, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so that was frustrating because that was like the first legitimate opportunity I'd had during the rut. Really good deer. By far would have been my best deer with a bow. And I screwed it up. And he immediately, like I said, he didn't know what happened. He made a big loop. I called. At one point, it looked like he was going to come right back, but he was still a kind of little weary of what happened over there. But he was right on to rutting, like trying, just running all around. And so at that point, I was just a little upset. I didn't have my binoculars, didn't have my rangefinder, upset about the situation and trying to just stay in it. It was early morning. I did a little more rattling. And then maybe within 40 minutes of that encounter, I hear ka-choom, 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 coming right behind me. And I look, and coming right down the lane, like right to me, shooting, like in my shooting lane at like 11 yards is a really big buck, another good 8-point. And right before he clears that final branch, in my shooting lane, he cuts into the pines directly behind me. And I'm like, frick.
So you were like standing up at that point?
I was ready to kill him, yeah. I wasn't even rolling on the Mag Pro because he was right there right now.
Wow.
And so I stand up and I see it's a shooter. He can't see me, and I'm like knocked on, or I'm clipped on, ready to draw, and he cuts right behind the tree and gets my wind and boogers out of there.
And that was what day?
Morning of November 9th.
That was a hot morning.
That was a good morning, yeah. So, but all of that to say, that was the first time I had set that stand this year, and I'd killed a deer out of there before.
You have?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
November 6th.
Yeah.
So what I had learned is I'm relatively new to this property. This is the home farm, I'll call it, the property I live on. And the stand and area of the property that I spent a lot of the early season, I don't want to say I burnt it out, but it was really good early season. And then right about Halloween, early November, the sightings of good bucks from this area where I can see a long way, like they went away. I started seeing a lot less mature bucks. And that time I didn't kind of piece it together. I was kind of chalking it up to, this is the lockdown. This is, the first couple hot does come into estrus, and they're going to attract all the big bucks. And I thought, basically I kept, under the right conditions, I kept sitting this spot. And what I learned after pulling camera cards and making some different sits on the property is they shifted to some thick cover, as you would expect, right at the end of October into the first week of November.
Right.
And there were some spots that I could have hunted and no doubt probably run into some better deer, and I just was hunting the wrong spots. But you only figure that out from hunting the property and getting those experiences. So that was really frustrating, but a good learning lesson. And then I just kind of stayed after it. Morning of November 12th, I went and made a sit. I only had like 2 hours to sit that morning, a little less. And but at that point, like we're running up to gun season. I'm just trying to get as much time on stand as I can, even if you got to get out of there quickly for work or whatever else. Like I just had to take the opportunities I had, and got in the stand that morning. And
it's something too that the bell curve, when you talk about the does going into estrus, right? It's a flat line, and then okay, there's the first doe. There's the graph starts to go up, and then there's a couple more, and then all of a sudden you get to the peak. That's the top of the bell curve, and then it goes back down. For us in Michigan, with the way that the gun opener lines up and just the sheer amount of pressure that brings,
there's not
at
as
the
much.
peak,
There's not as much of a backside to that bell curve.
there's
it just
really
falls off.
It's a dramatic drop, and
Yeah.
it's not to say that these deer aren't still rutting. It's just very nocturnal.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Like that's, and I'm not saying that's everywhere, but I just wanted to clarify that because that's something I'm learning too. Like people who listen to this, they might be from Kansas, or they might be from Missouri, or they might be from Ohio. Ohio is a really good example because it's close to us. Like they have like a 3-day
gun season.
It's like it starts the 26th of November.
Yeah.
So it's like
the
at
problem
the
is
very end.
our November 15th gun. That's the problem. It's over a 2-week gun season, and it starts.
Well, if you define
the
it by
15th.
the problem being not getting to actually enjoy deer doing deer things during the bell curve.
Well, I
down
mean, just
cycle.
the rut feeling short and driving them all nocturnal.
Yeah.
has to do with our gun opener being on the 15th.
Yeah, it does seem like in Michigan the 31st, meaning Halloween, October 31st,
Yeah.
through like the 15th that's peak.
It. Yeah.
That's peak.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's early season, but
Yeah.
it like a swamp bottom. I don't know. You could sit here and there's too many
ways to dissect it.
Yeah, but in general, in Michigan, there's really not that backside, which is sad because it's funny. We look at videos and we're like, where are they at that there's bucks doing that still?
Yeah, like where are you seeing deer with antlers? You know what I mean?
It's tough. It does get super tough after the 15th and 16th every year. It just gets, unless you have a really big untouched food source, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
So I go out the morning of November 12th. At this point, I'm maybe starting to allow myself to feel a little guilty for different deer I've passed throughout the season, opportunities I've missed, so on and so forth. And right first thing in the morning, I have this tall, funky 5-point work through, and I'm like, man, that's kind of a pretty good deer, but for whatever reason, he walks by at like 25, 27 yards, and I passed him first thing in the morning. And then, I'm doing a little bit of calling and some rattling and stuff. And as the morning goes on, I end up seeing 6 more bucks, all younger ones. Nothing bigger than that 5-point. And the 5-point was just like really tall. I rattled again, and then that 5-point had circled around on the property and comes from the original direction that he came from the first time. And he comes right down to my tree, and I'm like, man, maybe I will shoot that deer. Kind of feeling like, man, God's telling me, don't be choosy here. You're running out of time. Like, you should shoot this deer. And he works down, and I kind of make the decision that I'm gonna pursue this opportunity as if I want to kill this deer, and then I'm just gonna make a decision in the moment. And he's working towards where the rattling was coming from, and you can tell he can't quite figure out where it's coming from. And as he gets close enough for me to really kind of look at him with my eyes in good daylight now, because again, the first encounter I had with him was earlier in the morning. I decide, man, if I can get an arrow in that deer, I'm going to shoot him. And so at one point, he's still trying to figure out where the rattling was coming from, and I grunt behind my tree, kind of favoring where I want him to go based on the wind. And he marches right in to like 15 yards. I draw back. It's a chip shot, and I hammered him. I mean, he went 45 yards and tipped over, and all on camera. So I was, at that point, just relieved more than anything to be on the board. As silly as it is, like if I'm going to be honest with myself, I have sort of a streak of maybe 6 years in a row of killing a buck with my bow. And it wasn't like necessarily like, man, I don't want to lose this streak, but I just felt, I mean, I guess in a sense that's kind of what it was. Like I'm not as worried about tagging out, but I love bow hunting, and gun season was about to be here, and I'm like, even if I shoot 2 great bucks during gun season, like I I couldn't get my mind wrapped around not shooting one with my bow this year, and then the suspense and nerves and anxiousness next year when it's been literally at that point it would have been 2 full years before you drew back on and killed a deer with your bow, and I wanted to kill him, so I killed him.
Yeah, it was. I liked it. It was a sweet deer.
I think so too. He's definitely not my smallest deer I've killed with a bow for sure.
Well, he was a 2-year-old deer, I think.
Yeah, no question.
I think both of the deer that I shot were probably 2.
Yeah, he was a 2-year-old deer. Had a bigger body than I was a little deceived by that. He had a pretty good sized body on him.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought
he's yeah, he had a great body. He's 130,
135 or
30 something.
Yeah, no, I mean dressed and that. Yeah. Anyway, I felt good about it. I was happy to be on the board, and at this point, on November, what is it? Recording this on November 26th, I still have a tag in my pocket, so I'm gonna keep doing the late season thing. Try to get some more sits in. I'm hoping I do have a food plot that did halfway okay. Like there's certain spots of it that still have big bulbs of turnips and radishes in it, and I'm hoping as we get closer to later, like late season here, that they'll start hammering that stuff, and we'll see. Maybe I can still fill another buck tag, but all in all, I just I learned some things that are going to put me in different spots next year during the first 2 weeks in November.
Have you been monitoring that food plot at all? Or deer hitting it?
Oh yeah, but I think it's a lot of nocturnal movement stuff. But yeah, there's sections of it that are pretty well mowed down. So
that would be fun to go out there and.
I mean, typically, the first good frost freeze that you get, all of the leaves and stuff on a brassica food plot will turn real starchy and sugary or whatever, and they usually eat the tops right off of them. And then later season, they'll come back and start eating the bulbs, the big roots and the actual turnips and radishes. So we'll see. Maybe they'll move back in there in the next couple weeks and can catch a buck coming in there following does late season, trying to get caught back up on his eating. So we'll see.
And this video will be on our YouTube page. It's a pretty great video.
It's a sweet video. Trav did a really good job with it. It's going to be called like the Cole Farm 5 or something like that.
The Cole Farm 5.
Big 5-point. And yeah, just it was like a big confidence builder. Like just being patient, executing the shot, watching him fall. Like it just, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you absolutely just whacked him. I mean, hammered him.
Yeah, I mean, double long, he went 40, 45, 50 yards.
In terms of a shot execution, you couldn't ask for anything better. I mean, the footage was fantastic. You punched him. I mean, just.
That FX4 from Rec, it's the third deer I've killed with that broadhead, and I freaking love it. I honestly, I've got some of their mechanicals too, but I'm not gonna use them as long as these fixed blades, these FX4s, keep flying like that. They just go where I want them to, and they kill deer. And the two I killed last year with it, like went right to the freaking shoulder. So,
yeah, big shout out to that.
Yeah, I like that broadhead.
Matt knows what he's doing.
He does, yeah.
Well, this will be airing somewhere after Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
We have 3 new products. Count them. 1, 2, 3 new products. It's a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah. Some of them, I mean, one of them in particular, we've been teasing for a while.
Yeah. This isn't the time or the place that we're going to just dig into all those.
Right.
But that will be coming. I don't even know. We don't really have the actual release dates of these 3. I know that we're going to start to be going to some dealer shows, consumer shows here that we're going to try and have them out for.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the next phase here of in terms of order operations. We got a couple more good hunting stories, YouTube videos that are going to be coming out. We're going to share those coming forward pretty quick here.
When are we launching the elk hunt?
Yeah, that's one of them.
Is that on deck?
That might be safe for the very end.
Yeah,
because wow,
that's a good one.
It's a banger. That's
I think
best.
We'll probably get the whitetail content out, but I think that's got to come sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Trav.
But yeah, so stay tuned for that. We have a couple more episodes of hunting tales, kills. Probably some guests will come in, share some tales, and then
Before you know it, we're going to be selecting Mag 5 too.
Yeah. There's a lot of cool things that are coming up that we get to do that are like kind of a seasonal thing, and the Mag 5 is one of them. New product relaunches are one of them. Show schedule release is one of them. So this is kind of cool time of year. So just stay tuned for that, guys. We got a lot of cool things coming. Usually we do it at the beginning, but as a way of saying thank you for listening to the podcast, if you want to go on the paintedarrow.com website, use promo code podcast. Get 10% off. It's that time of year. Christmas, holiday, the whole thing. I can't remember when this actually is going to release. I don't know if it's right to say, no, Christmas ain't that quick. We got time for Christmas.
Yeah, get your orders in.
Yeah, get your orders in.
Tell somebody you love them by buying them a Painted Arrow Mag Pro.
Yes, okay. The Coal Farm 5.
Coming at you soon.
That's a wrap. Thanks, guys.
See ya.